So now after a play blast, we end up with this. And it's starting to get somewhere. I think it looks pretty sweet, honestly. Now, again, between the last lesson and this, I did add a few more nodes. Things that you've already seen, like a file cache. I did the time warp, just so that we can line everything up nicely. And so I'll show you that right now. Basically, I merge in the in-between sim right here. That's all those guys. In-between fill, which is all that stuff we booleaned out before. And if I go over here to the in-between sim section, we again brought things in as points, cache that out. I have a time warp that is keyframed like we did before to be at about half speed as soon as we hit a certain point. Transform pieces. I also cached out our fracture right here. And that's about all there really is to it. Again, things that you've already seen before. Okay, so now what is going to help us out here? Well, right now, everything's falling a little bit too uniformly. So we could actually use some meta balls to break up the shape of this. We don't want to go too crazy, but it will add some more variety to how this all falls, and more specifically, when things fall. So let's actually go over here, and really, it's a very similar idea to what we had with the p-scale when setting the active attributes. We want to just scatter some points, put the meta balls on those points, and then use that to create a force, which we can then use with the pop force stop. So in this situation, I could literally copy this whole thing, set it to manual, paste it over here, and instead of using a sphere, we use a meta ball. Now we don't need too many points here, and so when I go to copy this to points, I don't want it to turn into a giant blob like this. That's not ideal. Also, this attribute randomize, let's get rid of the animation on that and turn this down. So we end up with something right about there. We are going to keyframe the scale here though, so it'll just be a different value. So starting at 0, let's figure out when we want to add this variation. Things start falling apart, it looks like right around frame 34. So frame 34, we're going to have this guy keyframed, attribute noise, and let's set that to probably about right here or so. So we end up with this kind of thing, and then we can go back down, let's say to a value of 0 eventually. Again, we're just adding this in so that we can add some variety to the movement. Okay, so let's say that we have that. To turn the meta balls into a force, we need to use the force SOP, radial force, and we want it to push outwards, so we'll use a -1 on that force. This all can then get sent over to the .NET, specifically the third input, like so. Inside of DOPS, we want to use a metaball force, so pop metaball force. Geometry source is going to be the third context geometry. For scale, let's say a value of 5, and we do want to ignore the mass just because it makes it a lot easier to control. If you want a bit more variety, you could mess around with this force scale and the ignore mass based on all kinds of things. So maybe we can use a expression. We can randomize by the ID, and then we could just use the fit01 function and set the new range to 0.2 and 1. That way we're not getting to 0. So that'll add some nice randomization to the whole thing. Okay, also pop drag air resistance 0.0075 and a pop drag spin. This time at 0.01. These guys get merged in. That all goes to the solver. Let's actually turn down this metaball force. It's going to be too much. So we'll say 2. And let's cache that out, see what happens. So now if we take a look at these pieces, they are starting to experience a little bit more randomization. I can tell just by the way the points are moving. but I think it might be worth turning up that metaball force a bit more. So we'll do that. This time we'll go up to, let's say, a value of 3.5. Cache that out. So at 0.3, this is what we have. In general, it looks pretty cool. I like the direction it's going in general. We also have some weird business happening with the time warp, and you could really see it on the left-hand side with those small pieces which fly out. But that's all stuff that we can fix. I'm not settled on 0.3 as the right number for this, though. I think it's a bit too much. And also, I want to see what it looks like when we have smaller pieces. I think right now our fracture just has too many big pieces to feel like a big scene, and also there's just this awkward piece right here that's happening. So I want to see if I can maybe do another fracture, do another Voronoi fracture on everything, and then resimulate the stuff with smaller pieces, and then turn down that force as well.